Thrilled for this final session here today. Bringing us home is Reshelle from the Greater Chicago Food Depository. She's going to be helping tie a lot of the ends together today. We're going to be diving deep on the donors who stay, practical strategies for growing monthly retention, and we're going to be talking about how building a sustainer base and building that engagement is an engineered strategy, not something we hope for. And we'll be diving into why monthly giving matters, what's changed in the landscape, the systems that they've deployed. We're going to run through some incredible data and metrics on how it's worked, and most importantly, what you can steal and take away. But real quick, before we dive in, Reshelle, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Reshelle Scheffler. I'm from the Greater Chicago Food Depository, which for those who are local, we are Chicago's food bank, and our mission is to end hunger. We believe food is a basic human right. I'm proud to say we've been in operation since 1979, and we have 850 partners in our network. And we serve right now about 200,000 households a month. We cover Chicago and Cook County. And my role, I am part of the marketing and communications team, and I oversee all of our annual giving, direct response, which includes our annual donors, our leadership annual giving, and our monthly giving program. And my colleague Marta is here with me. And even though we're part of marketing, we partner very closely with the development team. And Calvin is here from the development team.
Who, congratulations, just got a promotion into leading peer-to-peer. Congrats.
And we'll be using the Fundraise Up platform for that.
Amazing. So, Reshelle, it would be great if you could maybe set the stage and just help ground us in some baseline metrics around the current state of your monthly giving file.
Sure. So I'm proud to say our current monthly donor base is 10,493. So we'll just round it up to 10,500 donors, which we're extremely proud about. And I leaned into chat a little bit, and that would fill 150 CTA buses, if anyone's interested. So in the last year, we've had 44% growth in donors and 33% growth in revenue. And our average monthly gift is just under $50. And as we've obtained more donors, that has gone down a little bit. And our churn, our retention rate is really high. It's at 91.7%. That's the retention rate for the last year. And another metric that we've recently really started leaning into is trying to keep track of any additional gifts that our monthly donors give. So this past year, 16% of our monthly donors have given an additional one-time gift.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm curious because when we were chatting earlier, you also said on the other end of the spectrum that churn is also what keeps you up at night. And so with a retention rate at, I think it was 91.7%, can you unpack that fear?
Yes. I think you probably are all on the same page because monthly giving revenue is so crucial for the sustainability and just being able to plan appropriately. And also because we've seen so much increased need, we are doing everything in our power to retain as many monthly donors as we can. It's, as you all know, acquiring new donors is very costly and it's very time consuming. And so this is something, even though our number is really strong, it's something that we're monitoring very closely, especially this recent cohort in the fall. You may remember that there was a government shutdown in October, and then starting on November 1st, there was a pause in SNAP benefits, which was the first time in the history of that ever happening. And so we just had a ginormous influx of donors. In fact, our new monthly donors increased almost 1,200% over the previous year. And I've done the math multiple times. So we actually brought on 2,100 new donors between October 1st and November 22nd. And so back to your question, that's why, we need the monthly donors to sustain, being able to feed our neighbors.
Yeah. So the unexpected moment in time where you've lost the SNAP benefits has led to a moment where there's an emergency need for funding. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, through that, what are you and the team learning in terms of how you're strategically engaging and retaining those donors? What are you practically doing in real time as both the need and the urgency and sensitivity and timing increases?
Great question. So going back to October, we knew the shutdown was going to happen for the most part, and we did have time to prepare, unlike COVID, which was a totally different situation, but still a lot of emergency donors. So we did have time to prepare. We were able to pivot our digital campaigns and our messaging to really ensure we were meeting the moment. We also used that opportunity to really reinforce and educate our donors why monthly donations are so critical. And so that really helped. We got so much earned media at the time, and we still are. And even though that's hard to measure, I can tell you every time there's a story in the news, our online donations just soar. When you look at the stats the next day, you're like, wow, we had a great day. So we had the ability to plan. We also we're planning to update our welcome series in January. We pulled that up to October, and we have a specific welcome journey for monthly donors, which I think has been helpful in the retention. We also took a moment to pause and think about what can we do differently that we couldn't do during COVID. And one thing that Marta has led and has done a fabulous job is we are now doing outbound thank you calls to all new monthly donors. And that was a big lift considering the volume, but it was done very strategically. So any monthly donor that gave $500 or more, we would call them within 3 business days. 1, to thank them, and 2, just to ensure that was truly their intent, because we had the monthly default set up. And then we worked through the rest of the file within 30 days to welcome all of the new monthly donors. And Tara helped pulling some numbers, and the retention right now, October cohort, we're at 90% retention, and November we're at 89%. So slightly lower than our overall retention, but we're still really happy with that number.
Amazing. I'm curious, before we dive deeper into retention, I want to focus on that 16% of gifts that are happening in addition to the monthly commitment.
Yep.
Can you paint a picture on, what's attributing to those gifts coming through as well? Is it more timing, media, emergency appeals, or is there anything that your team's strategically doing to drive additional gifts?
I don't have the exact reason why.
Okay.
I can tell you what I think is happening, because we haven't really analyzed that. But because these donors came on, a lot of them came on during the emergency situation, and we're still kind of in crisis, we have made a decision to include them in very specific campaigns. So they were included in perhaps a few campaigns for year end. But since the start of January to now, we actually have not included monthly donors in any campaigns. We've made a very thoughtful decision that we want to respect and honor their ongoing, committed, dedicated gift we get each month. And so we haven't, and plus we're in a really good revenue spot, to be honest. So we haven't really leaned into them. However, we do still engage with them through our monthly e-newsletter, which it's very informational, but there's an opportunity to give. We're still connecting with them on more educational and informational, primarily through text messaging about different programs we have, like our food rescue program, our city colleges. We've informed them a lot about what's happening with SNAP just to keep them informed. All of that does drive donations.
Amazing. Super insightful.
Oh, one other thing, and I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, is we also last fall did a special volunteer repack session. So anyone that lives in the Chicago area is invited to come out to our warehouse and do a repack session. You come into our warehouse, you repack food, which then gets distributed to our network partners, and then they give that food to our neighbors. And we did a special session just for monthly donors, carved out and saved a time for them. Really impressed. After that session, we received 19% of the people gave an additional gift.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Incredible. I'd love to kind of play in this space for a little while longer. So on top of what you just mentioned, the phone call that happens within the first 1 to 3 days after the monthly commitment, what else is happening throughout the year in terms of the monthly giving journey that you're using to maintain retention and engagement?
Good question. So as I mentioned, we do have a welcome series, and currently today that is all digital. So, and it spans 30 days. We do lean into the platform and use the triggered initial confirmation thank you email and the monthly email receipt. The first email they receive from us directly is from our CEO with a welcome message. We also do a text message so they can learn more, and also just to get them used to receiving text messages from us. We do another follow-up email, and then after that, they're put into our general journey stream for monthly donors, which includes quarterly newsletters. One thing we implemented this year is including a Post-it note from our CEO on the first quarterly newsletter a new donor would receive to make them feel a little bit extra special. There's impact reports. They receive our monthly e-newsletter, and we're continuing to do more to really ensure this audience knows that we know who they are, whether it's an opportunity to thank them or just acknowledge that, they are a monthly donor. And most recently, last week was Monthly Giving Awareness Week, which Dana talked about. We decided to repurpose that week, and we called it Monthly Sustainer Appreciation Week. And we sent out a postcard to all of our monthly donors that we had a physical address for. And then we also did outbound thank you phone calls. We leaned into our telemarketing vendor to help with that. And then we followed that week up with a volunteer repack session last Saturday.
Amazing. I think something that you do as well that was talked about in earlier sessions is you're actually tracking retention by all of these channels. So
we are not as well as I would like, but yes.
Well, give yourself credit where credit's due. But I mean, I'm looking at a quick chart right here, and it's incredible to see, that basically across direct mail, SMS, your ads, all maintaining around 89% retention. Social has 93%. So it's just incredible that you're taking the retention measurement in going to a deeper level in terms of all of the channels in which you're engaging and communicating with your donors. I'm curious, do you get any kind of feedback from your donors, or how are you collecting feedback on channel preference?
We're not. That's one of our key takeaways from today.
Cool.
I think there's definitely opportunities, especially in our welcome series, to ask donors various questions. We, especially their preference for communication, but also why they're giving, especially why they're giving monthly. When we do the outbound phone calls, the vast majority of time we're getting voicemails, which is fine. But occasionally when we do actually reach the donor, and Marta can attest to this, if there's an opportunity to actually have a conversation with them, many times they're thinking we're calling for another gift, and we have to state clearly up front, like, no, this is just a thank you phone call. And then they kind of relax. But we then take that opportunity to ask them what inspired them to give, and then we invite them into, if they want to come out to our warehouse for a tour of our facilities.
Amazing. Are there other touches that you see having an outsized impact?
I think text messaging was a big learning this year. And And really, I think the volunteer repack sessions, it's a great way to connect with our donors, like face to face, and really have an opportunity to deepen the conversation and the engagement.
Can you actually break down how those volunteer repack sessions work and how you execute them?
Yes. So we have about 25,000 volunteers that come through our warehouse annually.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a lot. And that's how we can get our work done because, I mean, there's so much food that's repacked. Fiscal year 25, we distributed 120 million pounds of food. So there's a lot of food coming through our doors and going out to our neighbors. So we rely on donors or volunteers. And so we decided we wanted to test having a repack session dedicated to our monthly donors because it's an opportunity to acknowledge them and also to secure like a coveted repack time, especially in the fall. Like those sessions, Saturday mornings fill up so fast, and so we're able to secure that time. It's about a 2.5 hour commitment. We invite them, and they can bring their family, kids 5 and up, and so it turns into a little bit of an event for them. We take the opportunity to acknowledge them up front. They go and do their work, and then usually after the session, there's some type of maybe small gift, whether it be a button or a postcard or something they can take, but just really an opportunity for us to engage with them and talk to them. And we've had a couple, one donor in particular, I know he's come back 2 or 3 times now.
Okay. Are you seeing trends or correlations between volunteer engagement and retention?
Not yet because I don't have that data.
Okay.
But that's something that we're going to be looking into this year is getting a lot more data around the different volunteer repack sessions we do and what's coming out of those. Because we don't do this just for monthly donors. We also last fall did a session for our lapsed donors as a way to get them re-engaged. And it worked. I mean, not everyone gave another gift, but it was just a good way to get people re-engaged. And then we're also going to do a session for our leadership annual giving donors and loyal donors. So we're trying to really lean into this and again, save those special spots for them.
Amazing. So you have a less is more philosophy. And I'm wondering, because you mentioned earlier about how you're very, very intentional about not asking within your monthly giving program. And so, I'm curious if you can bring us into a little deeper the psychology behind the reduction of the ask and how you take that less is more approach.
So a lot of this was spurred from the influx and growth of new donors last fall. And so, well, actually even prior going into October, we were doing all of our calendar year-end planning, and we decided to take approach of monthly donors were going to be suppressed from pretty much, I say everything, but we did include them in like 2 Giving Tuesday emails. They received maybe 1 calendar year-end email, but we suppressed them from everything else. And but we continue to monitor like our revenue and things like that. So if we needed to add them back in, that would be easy to do digitally. But the revenue, and this, it's not just us; it's all food banks are like, people have been very generous. We have great donors. And so we did the analysis after calendar year end, and with this email suppression, it resulted in 50% less unsubscribes. We considered that a huge win and also a big lesson learned, because then we decided, okay, with this insight, maybe we should look at the rest of our donor base and really be more thoughtful, because I bet everyone in this room feels like they get too much email, right? So we decided that any donor that has not engaged with our email in the last 8 months, they were not going to be included in any emails. That obviously helps like a lot of our reputation, open rates, all of that. And then we also, with that approach, that meant, okay, if it's January and we're suppressing people that haven't given or haven't opened in like the last 8 months, we're missing people from last January. So then we pulled in a cohort of people that gave the previous January. And so every month we pull in people that gave the previous year that month, because there seems to be a cadence. And also anyone who has a solicitation preference for that particular month. And this has not hurt our revenue at all. and it's something we're going to continue doing. However, one thing I will add, I was at a webinar a few weeks ago, and I can't remember the organization, but they did a test last fall where part of their monthly donors didn't receive a lot of communications, but then they amped it up for like another part of their base. And what they learned is it did not hurt their retention, and it actually resulted in more revenue. So that's something we want to test this coming calendar year end. We're going to be very thoughtful in the approach, but I want to just make sure we're not potentially leaving money on the table, and also make sure these donors still have the opportunity to give an additional gift if they feel so inclined.
Do you have other, as you look ahead, like over the next year, like what are some of your other big bets that you're placing? What are other research projects that you're diving into, investigating? Just kind of curious, like what are the top things on your radar as you move forward?
So one thing that we just started doing this quarter is we did a physical address append. Because through our conversion process on Fundraise Up, we require the bare minimum information because we want the conversion. And so surprisingly, we didn't have as big of a gap in physical addresses as we thought, but it's still a gap we want to fill because Giving Tuesday, we did a postcard mailer, and we worked with our direct response agency to figure out like which donors should we target, and we did a nice mix. Some included digital donors, and we think there's an opportunity there to reach our digital donors with appropriate direct mail. Definitely not going to put them in our standard direct mail stream with the letters. It's just not going to work for that audience. But we are betting on postcards that are very visual with QR codes, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an ask. It could be learn more, or it could just simply be a thank you, maybe take them to a video. But that's another way we want to engage with our monthly donors. So that's one thing we're doing with the address appends, which then will enable us to do additional things that's on our radar, which includes anniversary mailings. We're trying to infuse some more direct mail touches with this donor base instead of everything being digital. I mean, we're still going to continue with digital, but it's just another way to kind of break through the clutter. We're also doing dedicated stewardship pieces for monthly donors, and we are definitely going to continue with the phone calls. In fact, we've invested a lot of our budget into working with our telemarketing vendor to do that. We're going to start that basically like on July 1 because it's from a volume perspective and just all the other things on our plate. It just makes sense to have them do that. And also, I don't know if I mentioned anniversary mailings. That's something we haven't done in the past, but yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I'm curious. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but I'm especially hearing that with alongside all of the digital touch points, there is great intentionality around human touch points, whether that be phone calls, scaling the calling center,
Yep.
What you're doing with direct mail, and I'm just curious for you personally. I would just be curious to hear about is there a donor or a volunteer that's had an experience with you that stands out, that you were moved by, that sort of kind of brings you back to center around why you do what you do alongside the experience that your beneficiaries are having?
I think there's two.
Okay.
I'll be quick. I helped out a little bit with the outbound phone calls, and I think it was in January, was able to talk with a donor, and she was just so grateful for all the work we do, and she really shared with me just the trust she has in our organization. And that just made me feel really good. And she also asked if I could help, like, pause her gift or lower her gift amount. Absolutely. So that was really touching. And then at the end of the year, we had a new monthly donor who's he told us, he's like, I don't give that much a month. I'm like, yes, you do. Like, the amount doesn't matter, right? But he came in to volunteer with his law school friends, and they wanted a tour of our facilities after the Repack session, which we gave them. They were super engaged, asked a ton of great questions, just a really nice group of people. And then after the session, we got in touch with them and thanked them. And a few weeks later, he reached out, and him and his friends wanted to offer pro bono services to our neighbors in the community. So that was really touching.
Amazing. Amazing. As we wrap up, 25 minutes flies by.
It does. I talk a lot.
You were fantastic. Do you have any suggestions, maybe 1 to 3 tips that you could give the room for if anyone here wanted to improve their monthly retention starting tomorrow? What would you implement right away? Top 3 things.
One, I would say definitely lean into your platform and technology. Let it do as much work for you as you can. 2, I would say look for quick hit opportunities to personalize any communications so your donor knows that you know they're a monthly donor. And 3, I gotta look at my notes because I think I would remember at this point. If you can, I would experiment with thank you phone calls. I think what we've learned, people are so surprised by that. It really doesn't have to take that much time. You can definitely just put a gift threshold in place. And even if you don't get the donor, most of us will get a voicemail and we can just read this transcript. And people are really surprised. We had a donor at our volunteer repack on Saturday mention that she received a phone call from us, and she was just floored that it was strictly a thank you phone call and we were not asking for more money. And she was just really surprised. So if you can do that, maybe give it a try.
Amazing. Amazing. I'd love to take 1 extra minute. Are there any questions from anyone here that you'd like to ask Reshelle, or areas where you'd like her to dive deeper?
Great question. So primarily, we definitely ensure that we leverage all the features of the platform. So in the vast majority of the time, we default to monthly giving. We also have the pre and post donation upsell in place if someone doesn't choose monthly. And at key times throughout the year, we ensure that our campaign page and any other messaging we're doing, whether it's an email or direct mail, that we really explain the benefits of monthly giving, not just for the donor, but for the community at large. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Anybody else? Fantastic. Reshelle, thank you. This was fantastic. Thank you for the work that you are doing and your team is doing. Thank you for coming today on behalf of our neighbors and friends here in Chicago. So you're doing absolutely transformative work. So
thank you. Thanks for having us.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And thanks to a great platform. And he did not pay me to say that.